everyone, this is Deepika Patel and welcome to the SchoolQuizz class. So in today's class we will see the previous year questions, okay, which can come to into your examination because many questions repeat every year. Okay, so let's solve all those questions and let's see how many types of question can become and can come into your examination. Okay, so basically today we will see the previous year paper of 2020 and 2019. Okay, and as you know that in our biology section the chapter 15 will come, and chapter 15 is related with the our environment. Okay. Chapter 8 will come, and chapter 8 is all about the reproduction, like the asexual reproduction and the sexual reproduction, reproduction in the plants, reproduction in human beings. Okay, chapter 9 is based on the heredity and the evolution. Okay, heredity and evolution. But in your syllabus, in the term 2 syllabus, there is specifically described that the only heredity will come into your examination. So we will see the questions from the heredity, not from the evolution. Okay, from the previous year questions. So today I have taken the questions from the 2020 and the 2019, and uh, basically I found the questions from the chapter 8. Okay, in both the years, and that question is repeating from 2020, 2019, and the 2020 also. Okay, so let's see all those questions and let's see how we can solve it, and we will see many questions, like how many questions can become from your these three chapters into your examination. Okay, so let's start. So from the 2020, there is a question based on the pollination. Okay, so the question is that define term pollination and differentiate between self pollination and cross pollination. And further, what is the significance of the define the significance of the pollination. Okay, pollination. So it is for the 3 marks only. Okay, so if this and same the differentiate between the self pollination and the cross pollination also comes in your 2019 exam. Okay, so in the 2019 exam this will this was coming like in the 5 marks. Okay, so we will see how we can solve it. Okay, so basically here you can see that there is not only one question, there is 3 questions in this particular one question. Okay, that is define term pollination. Firstly you have to define the term pollination, then you have to go to the differentiation between the self pollination and the cross pollination, then you will describe the significance of the pollination. Remember that whenever a question you read, okay, so you have to just answer the question as the question asks, and in that order also. See here, if you describe the significance of the pollination first, then go to the differentiation, then go to the defined term pollination, this will can cut your marks. Okay, so we will see from the defined term pollination. So in the answer sheet, you will write like, basically you have to do the answer number, whatever the question number is. Okay, let's suppose this is the question number 3. So you will write like in the capital word, like this type, the answer answer number 3. Okay, from the center. Okay, in the copy of the center. So you will write from the defined term pollination. So you will just do the heading part. Okay, pollination pollination in the capital words. Okay, basically the P is the more capital, and then the capital words but is smaller than the P. Okay, so basically this type of will impact into your examiner. Okay, this type of question writing will impact into your examiner. Okay, so what is the pollination? We know that the pollination is the process where the pollen grains is transferred from the anther to the stigma. Okay, so this is the basically the first process of your reproduction in the plant. So you will write that pollination in the, so you will write like this: it is the process in which the pollen grain is transferred by means of wind, insect from the anther from the anther to the stigma of the flower. Okay, so in these 3 lines, basically you have tell that in all these 3 lines, all the words. Okay, you have told like the what is the process. There is a process of the transferring of the pollen grains, and by which means it is transferring. It is transferring from the means of wind or the insects. Okay, so in these 3 lines you have described all. So this will impact into your examiner, and he cannot come, he cannot cut your marks. Okay, if you write like the pollination pollination is the pollination, in the pollination the transfer of the pollen grains from anther to stigma, so this is like the half answer. Okay, like pollination, in pollination the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma, from anther to stigma. Okay, so you read this answer and you read this answer. So which answer will impact to you more? Obviously this answer. Why? Because in this answer you have told what is the process and by how it is done. Okay, so the process is that pollen grains is transferring, and how it is done by the means of winds and insects. Okay, so this is like the half answer, because you only told this is like the regular answer which every child will answer that question. Okay, the pollination is the transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma, but you have to write like some more impactful answer. Okay, so you can write this type of answer. Now we will move to the differentiation part. Okay, so we will move to the differentiation part. Now, now you will write the heading, like the question asks the differentiation between the self pollination and the cross pollination. Firstly, he asked the self pollination. Okay, so you will write firstly the self pollination. Differentiation between self pollination and cross pollination. Okay, so you can see this question is for the 3 marks. Okay, so the 1 marks is for the definition, 1 marks is for the differentiation, and 1 marks is divided into the significance. Okay, significance. So this 1 marks will not cut, because you have written the impactful answer and you have described all. So this 1 mark obviously cannot cut, and this will give you 1 full mark. Okay, now in the differentiation part you can write 2 points. Why? Because the this is also for the 1 mark. Okay, and the examiner can, if you write like 1 point only, 1 point, so this might be, this answer might be cannot impact on the examiner more. Why? Because he can he can give you marks like 1 for the 1 point, or he can also give you marks like for zero point 0.5 and 0.5 for the 1 point. Okay, so he can divide the marks into half. So if you write like 2 points, minimum 2 points, so it, and the valid points. Okay, so it, this 1 marks will also not cut. Why? Because you have written 2 points and that is enough for the uh, marking. Okay, for the examiner. So firstly you will describe the self pollination and the cross pollination in the points. Okay, so we will write 2 points, minimum 2 points, that if the if the examiner, do the marking, so he cannot cut your marks. Okay, and if the, like, remember, in this type of question like the differentiation, name the points, or you are writing in the points, so always write the points more than the marks. Okay, like let me take an example. Like if a question is for the 4 marks and you are written 4 points, so there might be a possibility that any one point cannot impact on the examiner and can cut your marks. Okay, so he will give you like 3 marks or 3.5 marks. Okay, so but if you written like 4, if you written like 8 points, minimum 8 points, or you can also write minimum 6 point is necessary for the 4 marks, minimum 6 points, so will cannot cut your marks, because you have written the valid points and you have written the 6 points which is more than the marks. And if he do the marking, so he will not cut your marks if you are written the uh, valid and the more points than the marks. Okay, so make a strategy for this type to solve the questions in your examination. Okay, for any subject, even if it is a science, or if it is a social science, if it is the math is the totally based on the solution, but you can do this type of things in your examination to get full marks. Okay, to get full marks. So here we will write 2 points because this question is carrying the 1 mark, and if the examiner do the marking, so he can not cut your marks. Okay, let's erase this. Now just make a box. Just a second, just one more second. Just make a box. If you have no time in the examination, just left the box and just write the answer. Okay, self pollination and the cross pollination, and here you will write the remark, or you can write the serial number. So number one. So in the number one, you have to write the definition for the self and the cross pollination. So what is the self pollination? The uh, in the pollination, 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 in pollination, the pollen grain is transferring in same flower. Okay. And in the cross pollination, in self pollination, you can write here self pollination. In cross pollination, pollination, the pollen grains is transferring, or you can say transferred. Okay, transferred from one flower to another. So you have written the now the definition. Okay, what is the self pollination and what is the cross pollination? Now you will write the most important thing in the self pollination and the most important thing in the cross pollination. So what is the most important thing in the self pollination? So what is the two more important? See, the two more important points you can write, like I am telling you, you can write either of one. Okay. So in the self pollination, what happens that there is a less wastage of pollen grains. Wastage of pollen grains. Why? Because see, self pollination is happening in the same flower. Okay, so there is a flower. Okay, and in this flower there is the anther and the stigma both. And you know the stigma is sticky stigma and the anther. Okay, so you can see that if the pollen grains is transferring by the wind also, so there is a less wastage of the pollen grains because the stigma and the anther distance is too close. Okay, and when it is in the cross pollination, cross pollination, cross pollination. So it is happening in the another flower. Okay, so there is a flower and there is another flower. So basically what is happening that the pollen grains from this anther is transferring to the stigma of this flower. Okay, so you can see the flower distance is more and there may be a chance that the pollen grains will be wastage. Okay, so there is a more chance of the wastage of the more chance of wastage of pollen grains, wastage of pollen grains. Okay, and see in the self pollination, that in the self pollination the pollen grains less required for the fertilization. Okay, just a second. So in the self pollination pollen grains less required for the pollination, and in the cross pollination more pollen grains required, as you know that the some of the pollen grains will be wasted by the means of the transferring. Okay, so this is the one important point. And second, the important point is the that in the self pollination there is less variation, where in the self pollination, in the self pollination, and in the cross pollination there is more variation, cross pollination more variation. Why? Because see, here you know that different flowers are using and here it is happening in the same flower. So you know that you have read the variation, and the more variation, the more is the chance of the survival in the environment, because we do not know what environment takes and what happened in the environment suddenly. Okay, so there is more variation in the cross pollination and there is less variation in the self pollination. So you can write either of the point with the definition and the importance. Okay, so you can write here like this type, the importance of, or you can go with the only the point. In self pollination there is less wastage of pollen grains. Now when you write for the cross pollination, so you will write like this, that in the cross pollination there is more wastage of pollen grains comparatively to the self pollination. See, or you can also write of pollen grains than the self pollination. Okay, so why we are writing like this? If you write till here only, that in the cross pollination there is more wastage of the pollen grains, then it is a question like how much more wastage. Okay, how much more wastage? So there is a wastage comparatively in the comparison of the self pollination. Okay, So we are comparing here and differentiating here self and the cross. So we have to write like this, that then the self pollination, then the self pollination, that there is more wastage than the self pollination, okay, in the comparison of the self pollination. So if you write like this, so there is more chance, and this will impact more to your examiner, okay. Now we have, I'm writing one more point and you can write either of these, okay. Now the third point is the, that in the self pollination there is less variation, and in the cross pollination there is more variation than the self pollination, okay. In self pollination, I'm writing here short point, short form, that self pollination there is less variation, and in the cross pollination there is more variation than the self pollination, okay. There is more variation than the self pollination, okay. So why it is so, that there is less. So if you compare, tell me, if you compare these two pollinations, so which pollination is better? So obviously there is cross pollination is better, because the variation is more here, and the chance of the survival of the plant or the species of that plant will be more in future, okay. So this is the point of the differentiation between the self pollination and the cross pollination, okay. Now we will move to the significance of the pollination. Significance of the pollination. So just think, what is the most important thing in the pollination, okay. You know, that is the first, that the pollination is the first process in the reproduction in the plant, okay, in the sexual reproduction in the plant. So without this process there will be no fertilization, no zygote, and no no fruit we get, okay. So so you can write like this, that the pollination is the first process of sexual reproduction in the plant, reproduction in the plant, and pollination leads to the fertilization and further the fertilization leads to the formation of the zygote. Fertilization leads to the formation of zygote, okay. So so we can say that pollination is the base of sexual reproduction in plants. Reproduction in plants. So see, that's how you can solve the question. Sorry. Firstly, what is the question? Define term pollination. Differentiate between the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. Define the significance of the pollination. So you have written like, what is the pollination? So it is the process in which the pollen grains is transferred by means of winged insects from the anther to the stigma of the flower. Okay. Next, we have described the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. Differentiate between the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. So in the differentiation also, we will write the definition. What is the self-pollination called and what is cross-pollination called? So we will write the definition in the first point. Then in the next point, we will write the importance of that particular definition or that particular topic. Okay. So what is the importance in the self-pollination? That there is less wastage of the pollen grains and the less variation. Okay. So you can write either of these points. Okay. You have to write this particular point. It is mandatory. Okay. And in the second point, you have write either of these points. So in my opinion, you should write this, the variation point. Okay. Because it will impact more the examiner, and the examiner can guess that uh, you have the like knowledge of that particular topic. Okay. So in the self pollination, there is a less wastage of the pollen grains, and in the cross pollination there is more wastage. Okay. In the self pollination there is less variation, and in the more variation in the cross pollination. And now we will move to the significance of the pollination. So you know that the significance is the base of the sexual reproduction. So you can close your answer with that we can say that the pollination is the base of the sexual reproduction in the plant. So the question is all about the sexual reproduction in the plant and the pollination. So you should close the answer with that, because the question is asking for that. Okay. So this is how you can solve your answer. And remember, always close the answer on the based on the question, what is question is asking for you. So always close on answer that on that topic. Okay. So this will give you a full fledged answer. Okay. And it is not seen like this, that it is a half answer and not an impactful answer. Okay. So we will end this class here, and in the next class we will also see more questions and some more questions that can come into your examination. Okay. So thank you for joining the class. Thank you again.